My birthday month of September starts with a chapter of openness and honesty. I'm revealing life-altering events that have changed the way I live and love others. I'm candidly discussing ways that I've been able to finally free myself from things that hinder me from being my most true and authentic self. You're listening to Coleman on Purpose, and I'm your host, David J. Coleman. Hello and welcome to Coleman on Purpose. Are y'all ready to talk? I mean, for real talk on this chapter of Coleman on Purpose. We are back to our regularly scheduled programming. Thank you for joining me for the summer series. I hope you go listen to it if you haven't listened to all 6 parts of that summer series. But now it's time to get into some real talk on this chapter. This is my 21st chapter. The last chapters that I did was just chapter 20 in 6 parts. And so this is officially chapter 21. And I have a 21st birthday coming up. Go figure. This enlightening and more open episode that I'm getting ready to do, or chapter that I'm getting ready to do, is probably one of the most candid chapters that I've done, and that's why I called it Candid Confessions. And so in this 21st chapter, before my birthday, which is, I was gonna say my 21st birthday, it's not actually 21st birthday, I'm gonna just say I'm gonna be 41. So it's gonna be my 41st birthday that I'll be turning on September 21st. I wanted to get this chapter in, which I've been trying to do for a very long time. When I started this podcast, I wanted to make sure that I was as transparent and as open as I could be. I've always been pretty open with my story of how I got to where I am now, from like my brain injury and all the different things that was going on. And I talked this past summer just about the other sides of me and what I wanted to do in my life beyond my 9-to-5 or my job as a flight attendant now. And now I'm getting ready to be even more vulnerable in this chapter with a few other things. So I used to say, warning to the church people that were listening to these, some of these chapters, I used to say, if you grew up with me, if you're in my family, or if you want to remember that David from the past that you've built around this other person that you knew, or the person that I was trying to be at that time for you in order to make sure you felt comfortable, I used to say, skip to the next chapter. You might even want to skip the rest of the chapters from here on out. But no, now I'm going to say, no, I need you to tune in and listen to this chapter. This is the one that I want you to be the most tuned in for, because this is the David that is coming to his own, that's experiencing things, that wants to help other people have these same types of experiences where they're starting to grow or become who they are and walk in their purpose. So listen to this. Like, I was just talking to my brother. I was down in California with him, and we were having a conversation, and I was telling him how I used to live in 2 separate worlds. Like, I would see them, and then I would go and my friends would know these 2 different people, or I had to hide different things and all of that stuff. But no, they need to know that you're being the most authentic version of yourself. So in order to do that, I have to always also have transparency with the people that are listening to this podcast. This is my 2nd year of podcasting, and I have to be even more transparent with you, because I can talk about all the things that I want to do with my life, but until I get to these different parts of me, I'll never be able to move forward, because part of me has to be free to be me. And so this is why I'm doing this chapter here. And so I'm ready to have that honest and open conversation and like live shamelessly and walk courageously in my purpose. And that's why I'm talking about it. So as I said, I always try to please people, and I would also be kind of just afraid of letting people in on the real me because of things that had transpired in my life. I had a life-changing event that happened in my life, which it took me forever to get to this chapter, because I had gone through titles. I had thought about what I was going to do, and I was like, I don't really want to share too much. I don't really know what I want to say. But now I'm at this point where I want to talk about the life changing event that happened in my life, even more than even my brain injury to me, because it's kind of set me on this path. And I was in church, and I'm not going to get like super graphic or anything with it, but I was in church as a 7 year old boy. And a situation happened between me and a 16-year-old, changed my life forever. I was exposed to sexual things at the age of 7. And so this was a time when that person had told me that I can't go and talk to my parents. Like, this has to be our secret. And I kept that secret with me as a child till I had my brain injury and I was laying there in that hospital bed at 18 and finally told my parents what had happened to me as a 7 year old boy. It took that long a period of time for me to get to that point to tell them. Can you imagine keeping that information from the people that you love the most for that long period of time? Many times back in the day, you're told to hold secrets or protect yourselves, and because you don't want to maybe change the way someone perceives you as a child, you just don't know that not to tell them because you know you might either get in trouble or it's just something that you don't want to do because either you be ashamed or you'll feel like you'll be in trouble or you'll get the other person in trouble. So you run into these situations and you really don't know what to do as a child. But as growing up, like if I knew all the things I knew now, that would have probably been right away, talked about it. But I wasn't as comfortable with that. And I guess in many ways, like church allowed you to also kind of mask those things because there is this facade of being perfect or not having these situations. And as a child, you really don't know. You're just looking at what you see, how you see other people handle problems and situations. And you're like, oh, you can deal with this. You can bear it. You'll be all right. And I went through life kind of like that up until that time when I was in that hospital bed that you can go back and listen to chapter 2 like I always tell you to, because that is the crux of a lot of my story. But this event that happened was totally different because I was still heavily involved in church, and I throughout my life as a teenager I was so upset. I was so upset sometimes that you know God would let me go through something like this, just like many other individuals that I've come across that have had these type of behaviors exposed to them as children, young and maybe even younger than what I did. But I've run into so many people with so many similar stories sometimes, and you just kind of like, why did I have to be singled out? Why couldn't I just be like the normal person, or I couldn't just, float along and be okay without having to worry about that? Or you think about like, why didn't why wasn't this protection here at the time? But that's nobody's fault. These are situations that do happen in life, but I know it's so cliche to say like God doesn't give you more than you can handle. I know it's a very sensitive thing to really talk about. I like gulped when I said that because a lot of times you hear that quote, but I'm looking at how far I've come and what I've been equipped with a long time. And it does take a little time sometimes to get through some of those things. And some people go through life because they don't really expose it or talk about it or go to therapy about it. But through therapy and through different things that I've been able to work through, I'm able to share part of my story. And this is a part of me that I've always been kind of ashamed of like saying or talking about. I could only talk about it in secrecy or around somebody that I was close to. It just couldn't be out in the open. So I used to like worry about those things. And so I believe that a lot of times innocence is something that is so special. And when that innocence is stripped, it rocks your world completely and it reshapes your mind and how it thinks about certain things. So I really lived almost sometimes in a state of confusion because I was learning one way, but I knew of another way as well during that entire time frame. I have run into so many obstacles sometimes concerning my sexuality because it's such a huge part of my life and it's part of the society. It's not a huge part of my life. It's just a big part of what society wants to place, so much weight on. And so you just start thinking about it and you're like, I just kind of want to buck up against that a little bit. And you're kind of trying to buck a system that's been in place for before we were even thought of. You know what I'm saying? These are systems that were here in this world way, 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 way before. So those are not easy to break. They can only make you think differently. And when I think about it, I think about am I so why are people so concerned about it? Why are these why do these feel like obstacles when we're discussing sexuality, and why do they have to be such a huge part of it? I am never trying to buck against the science of what man and woman is, and that's the earth that we live in. That's what we were created in. And I guess I'm really trying to buck systems that are set up by others that put extra emphasis on what a man or woman looks like, how they act, how they carry themselves, all of these different things when you think about it. Can you imagine wanting to kind of go into ministry or walking into a marriage and being confused about your entire identity because of the events that occurred at the age of 7 and throughout my childhood, walking into these things and then everyone putting emphasis on what you are or how you act or all of these different things, or wanting you to be something that you totally don't feel comfortable with being? Can you imagine a life like that? It's just, you still want to be heavily involved in church, but you are so upset that so many individuals that you've come across have kind of exposed your type of behavior by either shaming it or doing something else that makes you feel like, you know, something's off, something's wrong. You got to do something about this. And I still recollect vivid times in my life where this has happened to me in both church and in the outside world. So this was even before I had my like the sexual exposure and all of that stuff at the age of 7. I was thinking back to times that things like this happened in the place where I felt the most safe. I'm gonna tell you this quick story. There were a couple of them, but there was these guys that were downstairs, and I used to have to walk to the snack machine to go get my snacks from down at this machine. And there's a fellowship hall that's down there. Usually like the youth and the young kids are sitting down in that like little fellowship hall or like vestibule before you go. I don't know what it's called, but it was like a little nook area, and you have to pass that in order to get to the snack machine. So as I'm coming back from getting my snack, they're snickering and laughing because I don't know if I'm walking funny or doing something that, you know, they're just kind of laughing at the way that I'm acting. I can remember my brother having to like come down and try to defend me at the time at the church. I don't even know if he remembers these stories, but I recollect these stories in my head because this was a time when, you know, they were teasing me for, you know, is he gay, or is he's acting a certain way, or he's acting real feminine or whatever like that. What's up with that? And da da da. And my brother actually had to come to my defense at that time, and you know, he did what he had to do. And me and my brother grew up very similar to one another, but my brother always, he was in sports. He had a lot of different things. So it was never anything with him. It was just like, I felt like the one that was always kind of just called out. I'm not really sure. I don't know his story, so I don't really know. But I know that this was something that I felt like I dealt with as a young child, and then just as growing and coming along. So I remember times like that, and then even times when I was going to get married, and I ran into like friends that I had had for so long that were asking, "Are you going to marry what? Are you marrying a man or a woman? What's going on?" But then I put this question in my head when I'm thinking about that. I'm like, what about, instead of saying I'm marrying a man or woman, why is that the first question? Why aren't you asking me like, how about, who is this person, and how have I found the person that I love so much? What is the reason for questioning something like that? And those were times in my life where I really started to like feel bad, because it was like, man, on a day when I'm supposed to be happy or people are supposed to be happy for me, they're still questioning this thing about me because they've maybe seen me conform to different ways, or they want me to be a certain way that I just, at that time, that's not where I was at. And that's why I always talk about a journey in life and like moving forward. People move. They have different seasons of different things. And sometimes people want people to remain in a season or remain where they're at just because it benefits either them or just makes them feel better about themselves, that you're just normal. And there are some people that have always pushed against the norm of things, and when we feel boxed in, there's other avenues and there's other ways of looking at life and there's other ways of doing things. And it allows you to evolve and it allows you to be a lot wiser and smarter. I just think about a lot of those things. And so these examples have always really baffled me, but they've been a huge part of what's made me try to think harder about the limits that we put on ourselves when it comes to just sexuality in general. I don't believe, and I never will believe, that a person's sexuality makes them who they are, but I am thankful for each and every experience that I've had that have made me who I am, both good and bad. Those bad experiences that I remember and those good ones that I also remember. Now, let's quickly go to my anchor. My anchor is the Bible. I have read the entire Bible many, many times, and this is what I follow as a Christian. But I've realized that myself and everyone else that I've known looks at the word of God in different ways. And some people are very like, this is the word, this is it. But many people come up with their own interpretations or different things like that. And there's people that are very adamant about this is this. But my mind thinks a lot differently at times. And I believe the word of God. I believe everything that's in it. But I don't want to get into like a whole philosophical conversation about the Bibles, because many people can argue on any side. But I believe that people sometimes say it's translated differently in different ways, or they'll say, oh, this was written by the white man or something like this. This is not our version of the Bible. But if you do a little bit of research, like deep research onto a lot of these things, I just spoke with someone recently about it. It's off the chain. I hope to get her on here sometime so she can break it down. Somebody that was in Africa and everything like that. So I hope that she will come on here and break it down at some point in time. But all I know is that many of the words that have brought life to my soul have come from those pages. Everything that is in there. I will say, there have been many times that preachers have preached different things that have sounded different from the way that I read the word. And they've caused a bit of confusion sometimes when I'm thinking about it. And it's mainly when it comes to just the love and sex part. There it goes. The sex and sexuality part of all of that. That whole thing right there is where it gets a little muffled. And I recently talked to a few people about why so much of our identity is tied into what and who we love and who we lay with. And honestly, being able to speak from different spectrums, I can say I don't even know if I want to lay with anyone sometimes because of the weight some people put on all of these things, from the church to the LGBTQIA plus end of things. I used to love the term love is love, but I had to realize that I may have been putting a lot of emphasis on sex because of my experiences. And I love people very deeply when I do really fall in love or love someone. In my head, I'm like, is this right or is this wrong? Or am I being true to who I am? These are all the questions that go through when I'm in the process of either loving or falling in love and all of these things. So many times, if people can't figure you out, they go ahead and they just make up their own thing in their head of what you are, or they'll have these assumptions, or they'll try to categorize you. And anyone that knows me knows that I do not want to be put in anybody's box. Do not label me. I always do this because it's just not for me. So I understand that it might ease people's mind when they can call you something, but I usually will shy away from it. We enter this world and are given names from the beginning of our lives, and that automatically kickstarts your life. Names hold power. They really, really, really true. I don't know if y'all know it, but what you name somebody does hold power. You could have what they call in our society a masculine name or a feminine name when you come into the world, and that will start the trajectory of your life. And then suddenly I understand in my mind now why parents decide to name that. Some have made the decision to name their children after they get to know the child, after they get to sit down and really kind of realize like their mannerisms, how they are, what they just kind of give off. I used to think that was kind of crazy, but now that I look at it, I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense to me that they would do that just so they can get a, feel for it and not just name them off of something that they wanted to name them. So I don't know if I would ever do that if I ever had a child or something like that. Would I wait until to name the child? But it doesn't seem as crazy to me now that I'm like just kind of coming into this ideal that it's always been in my head, but I just didn't know how to approach it. So I think about it, even how we categorize ourselves sometimes by the date of birth, because there you have astrological signs. Everything's connected to the stars. These are your actions because you're in this date or this range of things. And sometimes people just adjust because that's what that sign is. That's what they've heard that sign is supposed to do, or something like that. Or this is what the world has told us. That is how a Virgo acts. That's how it. And you're like, oh yeah, that's me. And then we just keep the same attributes when you actually have control over how you handle things and how you manage your life. You do. It's not in a star to me. Like that's not, your star is not controlling your actions. And that's just what I feel. The only star I look to is God. God is my head star in my life. And that's who I feel like will lead me in the way that I need to go. I still can make my own decisions, but he's going to lead me on the direction or the path that I need to walk on. And so I think about those things, and I say as we grow and we start thinking about getting married or starting families, there's like this pressure because we want to fit into that box that society has told us we need to have. And so coming from that church background, that was one of the main goals. When you got in there, you got to get married, you got to procreate. That's a Bible basic. But what if you had a different path than what everybody else thought you were supposed to have? I just know that even though, there's a lot of people that are in the Bible that had children or were married and stuff like that, there might have been people in there that were not. And I know for a fact they were not, because Jesus had disciples following him around. We don't really talk about their wives if they had any, but they were in the Bible following someone who they truly believed in. So there has to be people in there like that. That's not saying I want to do that, because I know that I'm a loving human being and I want to have a love, but right now it's not any of my concern right now about trying to do that, because I'm trying to figure out me and understand the things that I need to do in order to move forward in my purpose. That is my main concern right now. That's what I want to do. And some people decide to do that. Some people decide to do that at a much earlier age. Some people decide to do that at a much later age. But you have to make those intersections and ways to get to where you need to be and not be conformed to all of these different boxes that we're put in sometimes in order sometimes to reach that potential or that place that you need to go. And so I just think about how perfect everyone was when I used to go to church and how that perfect look or different things affected me, even like telling my truth as I got older. And I was like, maybe that was wrong, or maybe something was off about that. Maybe I should talk to somebody, but it's little too late. So I just spent my time always going to the altar and saying, oh gosh, all this is going on, da 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 da. And I was always concerned about that. So let's say I wanted to be a leader of the church, which I was. I was a minister at one point in time, and people still say I'm still a minister, even though I don't like minister in front of a pulpit. But there was a time when I was really, really involved, and just think about it. Like at that time I was married. So, okay, it's easier for me to maybe make waves in here because people want to see leaders that are married, because you have other families coming to the church and they want to see that example. How is a person that's single ever going to lead a family that has a wife, a husband, children, and all of those things? How is a single person going to do that? I think people are still called even when they are single. That's just me. Like, I don't know I know there's plenty of pastors out here that are single and that are doing their thing, but maybe it's the representation that, you want to be following what the word of God says by getting married and doing those things. But I do believe that there are people out here that are able to do that, but it is what society wants to see, from leaders and from people that are in these positions of like, why are they saying, and it makes people start looking at them funny. And then we get back over to sexuality. I was watching a pastor who was having to defend himself about he's married for a long time and he had to defend himself about his sexuality, because that's like the first go-to that people will use to jab at you sometimes if they see that you are living freely and being something that, they're not used to seeing. Even when you are married, they will relate that to you. So sometimes people get married as a cover up. They'll be like, okay, I'm gonna get married and I'm just gonna have this wife, and it's a little arrangement, and I'm gonna do me because I want to get into this position of, I feel like I'm called to ministry and I want to do this. Some people do that, and that is not for me. That would never be what I would want to do in order to be in that place. Like I am a very, very honest person when it comes down to that. And it's just something I would not want to do. And so I think about all of these things, and I'm thinking about why it's set up the way it is. But let me tell you something, although I still go to these places. I still go to the church. I still find life in the church. There are still people that are in that church that are going through similar things like me, that are still there, that are walking through these things, and they are coming to this place to be recentered, to be revived, to get that extra boost that you need to get you through the day or get you through the week. And I feel like many people find other ways that they feel centered and they find that peace. I just am telling you about my experience and where I find my peace and where my joy and where all that comes from. It comes from Christ. When I say that, I mean it. It comes from Christ. So I believe that all of those things are there and they mean something. So as I'm continuing my main thought in this chapter, I wanted to share where I'm at in life right at this moment when it comes to all of this. And there are so many moving pieces to building a life that I want, or I know outside of what my friends or outside of what my family want. I want to live my most authentic life, untied to the categories or the stereotypes that we place on one another every single day, knowingly and unknowingly. It's insane when you really break it down, but I'm not going to get into all that. I'm going to recenter into this poem that I wrote back in July. It was called, I'm getting you could tell my voice is quivering and I'm getting a little emotional because this poem that I wrote at nighttime was called Can I Be Me for a Second? And that was the original title of this show. And then or this chapter, and I decided to change it to something different. But I want to read this poem to you because it really spoke life into me. And I want you to hear beyond the words or the buzzwords that are in here and just listen to what it's saying. And this was it. I've been trying to be free, trying to be delivered, trying to be gay, but for a second, can I be me? Everyone has all the answers for what is right, answers for what is wrong, answers for who I am. But for a second, can I be me? Eventually, you'll find your tribe of divine artistic people, tribe of saved Christian people, tribe of open queer people. But for a second, can I be me? Am I searching for acceptance? Acceptance of my creative work and ideas, acceptance of how I love, acceptance of my human form. But for a second, can I be me? With myself, I have been patient with success in a field of many compromises, patient with learning my relationship is with my Heavenly Father and not religion itself, patient with who and what I choose to love and be attached to for the rest of my life. But for a second, can I be me? I love that I'm creative. I find eternal life through my faith in Christ, and my heart not only belongs to Him, but everyone that has seen me beyond how I've seen myself many times. I now know I'm filled with genuine love, with everlasting life, and a kind and sincere heart. My love, my life, and my heart are all intertwined. They make me what and who I am. I no longer rely on a second, but for every piece of life that's left within, I can now be me. Pause. I wrote that everything that I've talked about from the beginning of this chapter to now, have been me. And it's part of my life. It's part of my story. It makes me into the person that I am. It makes me have compassion for others. It makes me know all of these things that people can't always relate to. When you haven't walked through it, you cannot in any way, shape, or form relate to the person that is living that. That's that. And so I feel myself daily being myself. I'm not trying to emulate anyone else. I'm not changing myself because I'm in a different environment. I've truly forgiven any wrongs done by anyone in my life, and I'm moving forward in what I know I'm being called to. So right here on this podcast, I want it to be the last time in this type of setting that I talk about this thing that happened way back when I was a child. It's going to help people in the future, I know. That's what I know. But I have to not return or condemn myself for those stories of when I was younger. I want to use them as tools to help others that may be searching or questioning who they truly are. And when I say who they are, I'm not talking about identity. I'm not as in like your sexuality or anything like that. I'm talking about who they are related to purpose. And so when I start thinking about that, and it all comes back to purpose. And, that's, of course, the podcast, Coleman on Purpose. And I'm starting to believe that I don't need to have everything figured out all at once in order to walk forward in my purpose, which I thought I had to have a very long time ago. Thought everything had to be in a row before I could go forward, and that's why I've kind of backed up from doing different things. Or I'm not getting in the ministry, I don't want to do that. Or all of these things are going on. What are they going to look at? All of these things, and I look at it and I say, the things that have frightened me about some of my past and people knowing is all going to be laid out in this chapter. So that if they want to know what is going on, or if they really want to know the story, like without me skimming over it, or maybe if I'm in a setting that I don't feel comfortable with just divulging it on there, it's here. You can watch it at any time. Chapter 21. Come back to this one. That's why it's called Candid, because this candid conversation that I'm having here, and these candid moments that I'm really expressing and sharing my heart, is really what this is the heart of the podcast. And so when I come back to this, or when anybody wants to know about it, they can always say, oh, go back and revisit Coleman on Purpose Candid Confessions. That's the one that was on there. And that's what you can kind of hear the heart of David and what he was actually trying to say, or what he's trying to express, or why he feels the way he does. Those are the reasons. And I'm really tired of hiding, my story to make others comfortable, or leaving bits and pieces out to appease to others. And for those of you that absolutely have to use labels for people to identify, who a person is. If you want to categorize me from a spiritual side, I'm a born again Christian and a believer in Christ, period, from a spiritual side. If you are still wondering, from sexuality side or from the worldview side, you can place me in the Q category. And I didn't even know this was, I knew it was a thing, but I just didn't want to really attach myself to any of it because I just didn't know. I didn't educate. I didn't read enough. And so you can put me in the Q category, which I now know can mean queer or questioning. Either or. That's where I'm at in this juncture in my life. And so for those of you that are uneducated, much like I was, I want to read to you the definition of queer. It's an adjective used by some people whose sexual orientation is not exclusively heterosexual or straight. This umbrella term includes people who have non-binary, gender fluid, or gender non-conforming identities. Once considered a pejorative term, queer has been reclaimed by some LGBTQIA plus people to describe themselves. However, it is not a universally accepted term even within the LGBTQIA plus community. So even that term, there, not everybody accept it, but I've seen more accepted than don't. And then in the questioning category, which is like how I feel right now, sometimes when a Q is seen at the end of LGBT, it can also mean questioning. This term describes someone who is questioning their sexual orientation or gender identity. And I know people are like, oh my gosh, how long does it take to just say what you are or know what you are? It's not that I'm not saying or knowing who I am. I'm just placing myself for the people that have to have something in order to label something in one of those to ease your mind. It's not to ease my mind because I'm David. And I've always said that I'm David. So just know this is still a journey for me. Many people try to rush you through your journey so you can have it all figured out. But I feel like even in this state that I'm finding more of myself, and I'm really finding I'm becoming a lot more centered in this way or shape. I've always said this, and I said this to someone recently. I said, be patient with me. I've had a way unusual life, but I know I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And I know people have had unusual lives, but only you can determine what you walked through or what you've been able to go through by what is in front of you and how you're going to move forward with that. And nobody should rush you along in that process or make you feel like you're either running out of time or that you just, what is going on. No, it's just, this is the juncture that I'm at when it comes to all of that. If you want to be labeling and all of that stuff like that, that's where I'm at with that. I'm not confused about being a Christian or that my life belongs to Christ. I'm not confused about that. But when it comes to those junctures, I still have some questions. I also want to take this time out to apologize. I wanted to do this in this chapter because as I'm moving forward in all of my future chapters, as a much more open individual to every person along my journey that I may have hurt or confused because of me secretly telling you in private, but never being bold enough to walk it out in person, I apologize for maybe hurting along the way. Not even maybe, but hurting you or doing something that just did not seem like it was right because of where I was in my mind at the time. I've spoken to so many guys along the way that have dealt with this exact same thing as me, and it would astound you. It would astound you. But in each situation, it is so it's so weird because every time I talk with someone about it, it felt like ministry. In the craziest situations, you start talking about stuff and you start relating, and it all comes back to like this ministry type feel. And I understand now why an old friend of mine that we're no longer like on speaking terms or anything like that, but they told me 2 or 3 years ago, no more shame. And hopefully that person sees this and knows that no more shame means so much more to me now because I am not in that place anymore where I am shameful of where I am in my life right now. We all have different ways of looking at spirituality, but those words still ring in my head. Like he had a different outlook on it. I had a different outlook. He had like kind of left the normal church and went and did some other things, but I respect exactly what he told me about no more shame because we shouldn't have that in any aspect of our life. And so I no longer have to hold in my story because just like my story or stories are paving the way to my purpose, it's also going to help that next person move forward into theirs. I am not saying everybody has to tell their deepest, darkest secrets that are within there, but I am saying that every mistake, every misstep, every victory, and every accomplishment can be shared if you feel that tug to do it or if you feel like your spirit is telling you to do it. In my very first chapter, I talk about growing up in church as a young child, and I went to church because I had to, but as an older adult, I go because I want to. After all that happened, I still know I belong in church in some aspect or some way, shape, or form. That's the deep part about it. And along the way and through each season of my life, the Lord has been able to minister to me and prove himself faithful to me over and over again. It's like my favorite Trinity 5-7 song, over and over. He keeps blessing me. He keeps showing me ways that are blowing my mind. He brought me from so many different trials, so many different things. And he's given me this person that I am today. And he wants me to live very full and very complete and very, ready to share my journey and my experience with people, because I do believe that in some way, shape, or form, it will help someone. And so that's to anybody that's out there that needed to hear that. It's so wild that the place that broke my innocence is still a place where I find comfort, but I'm not finding it in the place alone. Yes, I go there for, community and all of those things, but I'm finding it through the one that I follow, which is Christ. And I take time to thank the church. I'm saying that on here because this is not a church bashing thing or anything like that. I take time to thank the church for the lessons, for the community, and what is going to grow even more when they truly begin to meet people where they are. I see it happening. It's already happening right now, little by little. There's bucking in that system as well. But little by little, I can see the changes that are attempting or trying to happen, and that's good. We just need more of it. More people to be outspoken, more people to really show true love in these situations and educate yourself on things that you're not familiar with. That's all that it needs to do in order to be there. Meet people where they are for real. And that's all I wanted to say on this chapter of Coleman on Purpose. Man, this was a very long chapter, but it was a needed chapter. And there's going to be an even better chapter that is coming after this. I cannot wait to share it with you. So make sure you are tuning into the very next Coleman on Purpose after this one. But in the meantime, I need you to head over to Instagram and type in Deluxe Dave, DeluxeDave, and then slide on over to Coleman on Purpose, and you typing just Coleman on Purpose. You can also follow that on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. I just got live privileges on TikTok, so I don't know if I'm gonna be doing lives or anything, because the Deluxe Dave TikTok is a little bit more for me, for my artistic outlet. But you can head over to Deluxe Dave and follow me there on TikTok, or it's under David J. Coleman. Or you can follow Coleman on Purpose, which is specifically for the Coleman on Purpose podcast. And I hope that you will follow that as well. Until next time, and I really mean this one now, because now I can move forward in these chapters being everything that I am. You are unique, you are loved, and you are created for greatness. Until next time, holla.